Well, let's see. 3 days before Christmas, we're coming on to Tybee Island, Georgia, which is east of Savannah. And I'm actually riding the old railroad bed that was removed back in the 1930s, I think. 33, 35, somewhere in there. It was built in the 1880s, and it served up until that time. The railroad was actually before the road that comes out here now. I don't think the road was built till about 1920s, and then some bridges had to be built and things like that to get out to Tybee Island. So that's pretty much the history on the railroad. But we're riding the old railroad bed. We got off of US 80. I mean, if you want to see some commercial and things like that, but if you want to go back in time and ride on the only way to get out to the island at that time, I think, unless maybe you came by horse and swimmed a couple of creeks and rivers and things like that, but there were no bridges out here, so this is the way you went. But we're riding the old road bed, and it pretty much parallels US 80. US 80 and the railroad runs from west to east, or east to west, whatever you want to call it. And it went from Savannah to Tybee Island. So that's where we are. And I'm gonna ride a little bit more of it. It's quite, it's great that they preserved this road. There's some other roads near it that are paved, but they kept this one dirt. But this is it. This is the old railroad bed that came to Tybee Island when it was developed back in the 1880s. Now, when you get up here closer to the residential area, which was actually this was called Fort Scriven back then. It was a fort that was built, oh man, many years ago, and it stayed active. I think it started in the 1890s. Now, I'm going to interrupt for a minute, but you can see the paved road next to the old road that we're on, the old railroad bed. Fort Scriven was built in the 1890s, and it was a coastal defense fort with some very large cannon, and it served up until the end of World War II. In 1946, they closed the fort and I guess turned this over to the city. And most of it now is in residential. The old fort is still here. Or what's left of it is a lot of concrete, so there's no way very well to move it. But it's right next to the lighthouse, and I'm going to, in a couple of days, I'm going to take my drone and I'm going to film Fort Scriven, and I'm going to also film the lighthouse. This road went on into it'll come back into US 80, and the old railroad ran all the way to the end of Tybee Island, paralleling the Atlantic Ocean. And in the 20s, when they built the road, they built it right beside the railroad, and then when they expanded the US 80, when they widened it and realigned it some, the old railroad is pretty much under US 80. So I'm still riding in on the road, and this is what you would call a coastal cottage straight ahead here. That was I don't know how old this house is. It was probably built back in the 30s or 40s, I'm guessing. It's probably been remodeled and updated several times. It's painted lavender. Okay, this is the, I guess you would call it the rear. Well, I don't know if you call it the rear or not. The fort actually is on the ocean, so it's facing, I guess you would say, the inlet to the Savannah River. And this was, like I say, built in the 1890s as a coastal defense. And it is solid concrete. The whole thing. Over where at near the RV park, there's a remote battery over there that held some really large cannons, and I don't know if it was what year it was built, but it looks about like the same construction. And I'm gonna turn and you will see the lighthouse. But the lighthouse was built, I think, around 1730s. Like I say, it was added on to maybe once, maybe twice, but I think right now it is about 150 or 60 feet tall. The walls at the bottom are 12 feet thick, solid stone. I'm driving around here to the, I'm gonna call it the front of the fort, and you can see and feel the bumps, I hope, that I'm getting. The beach is to my right, and there's some dunes between this parking area and the beach. Well, I want to show you this restaurant here. Great place to eat. It looks like it came straight out of the Caribbean. It's red and yellow and green and other colors, blue and turquoise, but it's called the North Beach Grill, I think, or maybe just North Beach, but anyway, I call it the North Beach Grill. And here's the, well, you can't see all of it because of the way they got the dunes built up, but this is the ocean side of the fort, and